Growing up, you are consistently challenged, and if you want to reach adulthood, you will have to overcome whatever weird test the world throws at you, whether made by nature or man. However, one of the most famous tests is the Chunin exams. To anyone who doesn't know, the Chunin exams are the primary tests in the world of Naruto. This is where the Genin take a series of tests/challenges to graduate to their next level, that being Chunin. As the popularity of the exams has even reached our screens, it has put the question into many minds: what if character was in the Chunin exams? Most of the characters suggested for temporary administration into the Chunin exams would be characters from other anime.
Hey, it's me!
However, considering that anime had a major influence on all animation going forward, it is only fitting that we use a piece of animation that wears its influence from anime on its sleeve. I'm talking about the 2013 Web 2 actual TV show, Rwby. And in the universe of Rwby, children go to a combat school, they graduate, and then apply to one of the four great kingdoms in their massive schools. Then, they have to take an entrance exam, and the one that we witnessed had the characters taking part in some sort of forest. On top of that, this is the main step towards becoming a full-fledged huntsman or huntress. Now, before Kishimoto gets his lawyers, I must state that there are some major differences between these two states of events. However, the beauty of storytelling is seeing the contrast between two stories. A great way I show my passion is through the use of contrasting their power. So today, we will be seeing if Team Rwby has the strength, the speed, and the intelligence to pass the Chunin exams. Let's see if they can pass the first step of the written exams. Now we need to establish what version of the characters and exam we will be using. So, for the exam, we will be using the one that Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura participated in, however were evicted for this video. And as for Team Rwby, we will take them at the pinnacle of their school careers, bringing them to Volume 3. Now, that explanation out of the way, let's get into the exciting bit where the characters from this action show write on a piece of paper. So, getting into the complicated matter of whether or not they will even be able to get to the entrance exam. After all, it is guarded by two ninja using genjutsu. Unfortunately for our heroines, they have shown no ability to resist any sort of mental illusion and have even fallen prey to them on multiple occasions. However, it is important to notify that Blake Belladonna does have extremely enhanced senses, even more so than the others, thanks to the fact that she is a cat faunus. Faunus are human-like creatures with additional animal features which help them around the world of Remnant. So this means that Team Rwby would most likely be able to observe that something is wrong, even if they have no prior knowledge of breaking out of illusions. On top of that, there are additional shinobi around, such as Neji, who can use his Byakugan, meaning that sooner or later, they will discover that they are underneath an illusion and make it to the test on time. But since we are talking about Neji, it is only fair that we discuss a member of his team that was integral to the beginning of the Chunin exams, that being Rock Lee. Now, this is quite different from its original scenario, as Rock Lee will not be engaging in the fight the same vein as the original storyline. This is because, simply put, he has no idea who Team Rwby is, and on top of that, Team Rwby is a group of one 15-year-old and three 17-year-old women, so it would be kind of weird if they were beefing with a 13-year-old. However, now that we have focused on the test itself, we will be able to see if they will pass it. And I believe not only will they pass it, but they will do better than the original Team 7. Why? Well, this is because of two reasons. One, Team Rwby is incredibly smart. Rwby in particular is a master of building weapons. She built Crescent Rose from scratch, meaning that she should be able to dissect and understand the questions, especially since a lot of them are considered momentum, which is what she deals with. But Then we move on to the 10th question, which is whether or not you are willing to stay and risk not being able to participate in the exam next year, or if you are willing to risk it all in the sake of passing. And seeing as Team Rwby is naturally a group of go-getters and have proven on multiple occasions that they are extremely brave and courageous and are willing to go even if the odds are very unknown, I believe they would pass this test with flying colors, staying and by extension passing the 10th question. And now that Team Rwby has completed the test, it's time to see if they will have the physical stats to overcome the exams. So, let's start off with the physical application, that being the Alright, so the Forest of Death is the second part of the exams, and it is not as complicated as the paperwork. Why is this? Well, simply because it's about fighting, and now one unforeseen benefit that Team Rwby has to go is that they are most likely a low priority target to the rest of the shinobi, and that also means they are a low priority target for a certain person slithering in the background. I am of course talking about Orochimaru. Orochimaru was specifically there to look at the young shinobi of the 5 villages, so I don't think he would show intrigue in these outsiders, but at the end of the day, you're in enemy territory, so they're going to naturally prioritize higher level targets, which means that these shinobi are not going to target 4 random girls from a place that they've never heard of. And let's be frank, Team Rwby is also not very intimidating or intriguing, meaning most ninja are not going to be very assuming and leave them alone. Now it's time to get into their fight of, who they would naturally run into first. And I believe that is the 3 sound ninja. And yeah, I'm just going to say this outright. The characters use sound-based attacks to catch the movements of their opponents off guard. However, they are dealing with Team Rwby, who can dodge sound quite consistently and pretty easily, adding on to the fact they consider breaking boulders to be an adequate form of strength, meaning that they're not able to compete with the higher ends, which Team Rwby just naturally find themselves at. Combine that with the fact that an additional teammate 4 versus 3 supporting and providing firepower would, I believe, just not only defeat the Sound 4, but defeat them so utterly that they would gain their scroll and thus completing the Forest of Death, allowing them to compete in the I am quite intrigued about the preliminaries and the matches going forward. Why? Because I found something very interesting. Team Rwby's attack potency is not that great. However, it will get the job done for now. Why am I saying that? Well, right now with the preliminaries, we are going to be comparing the current matches. Ruby Rose versus Kiba, Weiss versus Tenten, Blake Belladonna versus Yori, and Yang versus Ino. And let's just say it goes pretty well for Team Rwby. First off, Team Rwby is on average quite fast, and I would argue, much faster than any low-level Chunin or Genin at this stage. And on top of that, thanks to their additional attack potency, I believe they would be able to overcome these challenges. So getting into the first one, Kiba relies on speed and power, which is not good when Rwby would naturally be above you in both of those categories. On top of that, Kiba is not very intelligent, and while Akamaru can attack and provide additional support, Rwby would most likely be able to best them just due to the fact that she is, well, faster and stronger. Next, moving on to the Battle of Summoners, Weiss versus Tenten. And it's 10-10. So, yeah. Listen, guys. I know Naruto characters are strong, but a swing has more screen time than 10-10. So I think we'll let it slide. Next is Blake versus Yor, the same person who Sasuke fought at the beginning, who has the ability to absorb chakra. However, he does this over a slow amount of time, which is not great for a fast moving, deceptive type combatant like Blake, meaning that she will most likely, you know, win, is the best way to put it. And then next is Yang versus Ino. And oddly enough, Yang is the only character who I think has a real notable way of losing in this matchup, and that is due to the fact that Ino has a mind transfer jutsu, which would naturally, allow her to infiltrate Yang's body and damage her, only to then leave once Yang is knocked out. However, it is imperative to know that Yang is so much faster than Ino. She might actually be able to blitz her, and while not one shot her, moving so fast and so aggressively might allow her to just completely obliterate her before she has the necessary time to react. All right. Now that I have, dove into the matches that are not as notable, let's get into the part of the Chunin exams that are held in an arena, much like the Vital Festival. For the quarterfinals, I have these matchups: Ruby Rose versus Neji Hyuga, Waishni versus Tamari, Blake Belladonna versus Gara, and Konkuro versus Yang. Let us start with Ruby Rose versus Neji. And it is time we finally break down their stats. So, for here, we have Ruby kicking the Griffith, which was calced 17 tons of TNT, compared to Neji being able to upscale massively by Sasuke's Fireball, which does put him at around City Block level or 100 tons. However, that is a very notable gap in power. Thankfully, characters can make up for it in other ways, like, for example, speed. So, if we compare the two, we see that Ruby should be on par with Mercury. Mercury was able to dodge lightning produced by a maiden, so natural lightning. This was calced in anywhere from 136 to 382 Mach. Now, unfortunately for Neji, we do like using higher methods when it comes to speed. After all, it is more consistent with how fast they get later on, and I believe that the higher ends for this calculation just naturally apply themselves better to the world, as Ruby is able to completely vanish sometimes if she's really putting her mind to it with speed. Compare that to Neji, whose best feat is keeping up with Naruto, and unfortunately we do not know how fast that Naruto is with the KCM chakra. However, we can imply that he is at least superior to Tamari, who was able to deflect sound waves, which clocked in at 24 Mach. Now, unfortunately, this leads to Ruby being much, much, much faster, but Neji being much stronger. So the question becomes, can speed overpower, well, power? And I'm going to be frank, I think it can. Now, I think that the Byakugan does naturally allow you to perceive things that are going to happen and does have that precognition. However, keep in mind, Ruby is able to move so much faster that even if you have the precog, she would be able to move out of all attacks you throw, as they would feel very, very slow. Because you have to keep in mind, Ruby is over 10 times faster. It's a very substantial margin, meaning that her room for error is much greater than Neji's. And on top of that, while Ruby kicks the Griffith is the best feat, meaning that, she doesn't scale nearly high enough is the form of multiple consecutive hits that I believe would eventually result in Neji's downfall. And this just concludes that, well, simply put, Neji can indeed put her down if he gets enough hits off. But the amount of force he is going to need to exude just to keep up with Rwby, simply put, is not going to help him reserve his stamina, which is exactly what you need against a fast, nimble opponent like Rwby. And on top of that, in this hypothetical matchup, Rwby will be landing dozens of hits before Neji can even land one. So I believe that Rwby will beat Neji, and I believe I am comfortable enough saying that. On top of that, there are higher metas for Rwby, which we might get into if need be, depending on the situation going further. But that's for me to know and you to find out. Anyway, next one. Waishni versus Tamari. So, essentially, Tamari should once again scale to the multi-city block level at 100 tons, and she is the one who performed the deflecting sound feat, meaning that's Mach 24.7. So once again, we have Weiss being in the same realm of power as Rwby, both in strength and, I would argue, speed. However, I would argue her attack potency would naturally be a little bit higher than Rwby, just due to the fact that her armored her summoning does allow her greater attack potency than most characters of her range, and could maybe provide enough to put Tamari down. I just think that's really contentious. However, one win condition that Weiss does have is the use of electricity dust. Unfortunately, Naruto characters, they are physically powerful, however, they do still get things like burns, cuts, and are susceptible to electricity. So that means that Tamari would naturally feel the damage of Weiss, and considering the fact that Weiss just has such a wide arsenal and can even move fast enough where Tamari most likely cannot perceive her, meaning she is going to honestly lose pretty handedly. I think the electricity dust is such a notable win condition for her, as that would not only put Weiss at an advantage, but Tamari would almost be getting durability negated on multiple occasions. And simply put, I don't think she has the firepower at enough of a consistency to put down Weiss, because once again, Weiss is going to be moving in and out of her Tamari's combat zone within the blink of an eye. And while she does have AoE attacks, which would make it difficult, keep in mind that those AoE attacks need to at least be in a general direction of where Weiss is. And considering Weiss can move so much faster than her opponent, the likelihood of Tamari successfully landing her attacks is actually, I would argue, she has a higher chance of landing attacks than Neji, just due to their fighting styles. But it would still result in what I believe Weiss winning. Now, let us get into Blake versus Gaara.
But I understand.
Alright, next is Konkuro versus Yang. And this is probably the most wishy-washy battle, where honestly, I can kind of see it going either way. Konkuro hasn't really shown any notable feats to say, but he should probably still scale to Tamari, so putting in that 100 tons, 24 Mach speed range. And it does make you wonder, would Yang even be able to fight the punch, would she even be able to break the punches of the puppets when they're that much stronger than her? And while the puppets are not the puppets are less durable than humans of the Naruto world, but keep in mind that's of the Naruto world, right? So I just wonder if she's even gonna be able to break the puppets. However, I'm not gonna lie, this is for story reasons. We will be having her move on. I think you can argue this one either way. I think it is far less clear cut than the matches I have provided prior. And if you want to make the argument that she loses, then you just throw Konkuro in the semifinals. Speaking of the semifinals, let's get right on to that. But before that, I need to ask one little thing. Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying this video. I made this video because I think that the idea was quite fun, and now I'm finally able to bring it to the forefront. I hope you can enjoy it with me, and if you want to continue to support the channel and support videos like these, please make a subscription. Alright, now we're in the semifinals. And for the semifinals, as I mentioned prior, story reasons, unfortunately, it will be Rwby versus Yang. And I think Ruby's just going to win because of two factors. One, I feel like Yang, there is a possibility of Yang forfeiting. And the other, I think, despite the fact that Yang was nominated for the finals and considered to be the strongest of her team in the beginning of Volume 3, the later half of Volume 3 shows feats that contradict this, where Rwby is fighting much, I would argue, more notable opponents, whereas Yang is doing worse than others around her. Okay? I'm not spoiling too much, but yeah, Yang at the end of Volume 3 is not looking great, and Rwby is looking quite good, actually. So yeah, I think Rwby will be moving on to the finals, one way or another. So, let's talk about the fun, which is Gaara versus White Schnee. And, oh boy. So, as I stated prior, White should scale a little bit above Rwby kicking the Griffith, which is absolutely nothing compared to Gaara's Saiyan Tsunami. However, it is important to realize that there are higher metas for Rwby, which I was bringing up prior. For example, in Volume 2, the food fight, Nora launched Yang Xiaolong into the stratosphere, pretty much. And when she came falling down, it was estimated that she got hit with around 48.8 tons of TNT. And while that is from Death Battle, which I'm not gonna lie, Death Battle has some very questionable scaling. However, when it comes to their math, they are notably very good. So if you want to use that metric, you can, but either way, it doesn't really matter, as Weiss does still have the speed to possibly hurt Gaara, and on top of that, most of Team Rwby does have access to different kinds of dust, like lightning, which in this case would naturally be effective against Gaara's Earth style, just how Naruto works due to the nature of matchups. However, I don't think that's notable enough to hurt Gaara. However, even if it did, thanks to the, lightning attributes of it, I just think that Gaara has so much more bulk. Like, one hit from Gaara is going to shatter Weiss's aura and put her out of commission. Whereas Gaara, he's not sweating even the 48.8 tons of TNT attack that Weiss can dish out, And it just isn't very fair. I'm gonna be frank. The only one who can stand up to Gaara is most likely Rwby, and I'll be getting into that now. Does Rwby have the attributes to take down Gaara? Well, as you can probably guess, no, not really. Now, I did save, obviously, that meta for later, but even if you round up and say that Rwby is hitting with 50 tons of TNT, it doesn't necessarily provide enough attack potency to get past Gaara's barriers. And while Rwby is definitely faster than Gaara, it's unlikely she'll be able to put him down. However, I did want to bring this up just in case. This is very finicky. How do the Silver Eyes react? Right? After all, the Silver Eyes do completely destroy. They don't destroy. No, they destroy magic. So what would that make it? Because Naruto doesn't have an equivalent of magic. So it does beg the question, would the Silver Eyes work on chakra? Because if that is the case, Rwby would actually have a very notable win condition. Because not only does Gaara have a lot of chakra around him, just of the nature of him being a far more notable opponent than most others of the time, and it would naturally beg the question, if the Silver Eyes worked on chakra, Gaara would most likely die. And especially considering if we resulted in the scenario of this semifinals where Gaara beat up Weiss and hurt her real bad, even killed her possibly, depending if the referee actually did his job. And then he beat up Blake, then Weiss, and now Rwby's turn, you know? So there is a innate possibility that the Silver Eyes would go off just from the fact that, hey, Rwby's Silver Eyes are stimulated by emotion. And they are triggered by emotion and either creatures of Grimm or any sort of magic being around. So if you do consider the nature of chakra to be on the more mythical alien end, which is actually possible considering that chakra originally it came from Kaguya, who was an alien, which is very similar actually to how magic works in Remnant, actually, now that I think about it. Wow, saying that out loud really does put it into my head how they're kind of similar. Where the gods came down and gave, the Earth population magic, and Kaguya gave chakra to the people of Earth. Definitely by different means, however, it is still there, meaning that there is actually a notable possibility that Rwby just whips out her Silver Eyes and blasts Gaara into oblivion. And if that were to happen, she would win, but it's very contentious. So I'm going to go with the safe bet and just say that Gaara wins. And yeah, that is what I believe the finals would go down. Alright, with the final rounds of the Chunin Exams being complete, how did Team Rwby do? And suffice it to say, they did pretty well. Now, I know you're a little surprised with why I continued the finals when that didn't happen in the original timeline. They were attacked by the Sound Ninja. But simply put, I just wanted to continue the exams to see how far they would get. And I see how any of them would, have the capacity to even win the finals. And unfortunately, I don't think they did. Now, they didn't truly fail. They did make it into the semifinals, all of them, and that is enough to qualify to graduate to Chunin. We know this simply because Shikamaru was able to get his title of Chunin despite forfeiting, and then he did not perform super adequately afterwards. Now, it does mean that it's possible to argue that Rwby, Weiss, Blake, and maybe Yang can all get the title of Chunin. that is if they do not die. Since they're fighting Gaara, there is a chance they don't make it. However, they can lose and still survive, similar to Lee and similar to Sasuke, and it just boils down to situations and whether or not other ninja around them will step in. Like I was saying prior, maybe the referee could do his job. Also, I would like to hear your opinion on how the Silver Eyes would affect Chakra, as that dictates whether or not Rwby can beat Gaara. But yes, to summarize, Team Rwby could pass the Chunin exams, but that's all for now. This was a little bit of a long one. I hope you guys had a good time in this video, because I did. I got to, discuss this with you guys, and I hope to continue this discussion down in the comment section below, because I want to hear your guys' opinions about the Silver Eyes. And I hope you all subscribe so I can continue to produce content like this. This is Rox, signing out.